Megalodon is the name everyone knows, the largest shark that ever lived, the apex predator that the ocean apparently had to invent because nothing else was fearsome enough. Except the ocean had already done this before, many times, and some of what it produced makes Megalodon look, by comparison, almost modest. Long before Megalodon appeared, the sea was already building things on a scale most people have never been told about. Predators so large and so capable that Megalodon, for all its size, for all its bite force, for all its fame, was arriving into an ocean that had already seen worse. There were animals in those earlier oceans whose remains still stop paleontologists when they find them. Skulls that take up entire display cases, teeth that dwarf anything Megalodon left behind, creatures that did not just sit at the top of the food chain, they hunted the things that were already at the top. And somewhere in the ocean right now lives an animal larger than all of them, larger than Megalodon, larger than every predator that ever lived, whose existence may only have been possible because Megalodon disappeared. The ocean has been building giants for hundreds of millions of years. Megalodon was one chapter in that story, not the first, not the largest, and not the last. If you're tucked in right now, phone dimmed, trying to let your brain slow down, this one was made for you. Give it a like, subscribe if you haven't, it's free, and it helps our channel more than you can imagine. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Now, let's meet the sea monsters that made Megalodon look small, long before it became a symbol, before documentaries, museum displays, and endless speculation elevated it into something almost mythic. Megalodon was simply an animal moving through a real ocean. The water it inhabited was not a stage built around its presence. It was an immense and crowded world already ancient beyond comprehension, shaped by countless lives that had come and gone long before its first appearance. To understand the creatures that follow in this story, it helps to pause here for a moment and look clearly at the predator that so often stands as the benchmark for everything else. Known to science as Otodus megalodon, it lived from approximately 23 million years ago until about 3.6 million years ago. Its existence is confirmed not through legend or isolated fragments, but through an extraordinary fossil record spread across nearly the entire planet. Its teeth and vertebral centra have been recovered from every continent except Antarctica, carried into cliffs, riverbanks, deserts, and seabeds by the slow movements of geology. Few prehistoric predators have left such a widespread signature behind. The most rigorous modern reconstructions place its average length at approximately 16 meters, with the largest individuals reaching somewhere between 15 and 18 meters. These estimates are grounded in detailed analysis of vertebral dimensions and tooth proportions. Among the most remarkable discoveries are vertebrae recovered from Belgium, measuring approximately 15.5 centimeters across. Even separated from the rest of the skeleton, they hint at a body of extraordinary scale, vertebrae several times wider than those of a human being. Yet it is the teeth that became its calling card. Some reached heights of approximately 18 centimeters, edged with fine serrations designed for cutting through flesh and bone. Throughout its life, these teeth were continuously replaced, moving forward through the jaw as older teeth broke or wore down. Millions eventually entered the fossil record. For centuries, before their true origin was understood, people collected them, believing they were the petrified tongues of dragons, strange relics from a world explained through folklore rather than paleontology. The marks those teeth left behind reveal even more. Fossil whale bones preserve deep gouges matching megalodon dentition, allowing scientists to reconstruct hunting behavior from wounds frozen in stone. Evidence suggests that many attacks focused on tail flukes and fins, disabling large baleen whales before a fatal strike. Some fossils preserve signs of healing around the bite marks, indicating that certain whales survived encounters and carried the scars for the remainder of their lives. In those healed bones rests a quiet record of pursuit, escape, and survival in a Miocene ocean far removed from the present day. Recent chemical studies have added another layer to the picture. By examining nitrogen and zinc isotope signatures preserved within fossil teeth, researchers determined that Megalodon occupied a feeding position higher than any living marine predator known today. It existed at the very top of its ecological structure, a hyper-apex predator sustained by an immense network of life beneath it. And yet precision matters. Megalodon was not the largest marine animal that ever lived. It was not the supreme predator of every age. It did not stand above the entire history of the ocean. Its achievement was different, and perhaps more interesting. For roughly 20 million years, within one chapter of a 500 million year story of marine predators, it occupied the highest position available in its world. That alone is extraordinary. It requires no exaggeration. Megalodon was real, confirmed, and immense. From this point onward, every comparison rests on that foundation, measured not against myth, but against the animal itself. Far from any modern shoreline, beneath a sky that would have looked unfamiliar even to the earliest humans, an inland sea divided a continent in two. Warm water stretched across what would one day become Kansas, South Dakota, and New Mexico, filling a broad corridor through the center of North America. Rivers carried nutrients into this shallow ocean, feeding an ecosystem crowded with life at every scale. Through that water moved Tylosaurus proroger, not the largest predator of all time, but one whose fossil record preserves a remarkably clear picture of how it lived. At first glance, its silhouette carried hints of familiarity. Long-bodied, streamlined, powered by a sweeping tail, it occupied the role of a large marine hunter. Yet closer inspection reveals something unusual at the front of the skull. Extending beyond the teeth was a blunt, solid rostrum, a projection of bone lacking teeth entirely. Paleontologists have suggested that this structure may have functioned as a kind of battering surface, capable of striking prey before the jaws closed. The image is striking, not because it requires exaggeration, but because the anatomy itself points toward an animal equipped to overwhelm prey in more than one way. Tylosaurus reached lengths of approximately 12 to 14 meters, placing it among the largest predators of the late Cretaceous seas. Size alone, however, does not explain its place in this story. Many ancient animals grew large. What distinguishes Tylosaurus is the record preserved inside its own body, across multiple fossil specimens, representing different individuals rather than a single exceptional case. Paleontologists have recovered evidence of stomach contents. These discoveries provide a rare opportunity to move beyond inference and observe actual meals from an ocean vanished tens of millions of years ago. Within those remains appear the bones of a Hesperornithine diving bird, an aquatic hunter approximately 1.5 meters long. Elsewhere are the remains of sharks. Large bony fish are present as well, including Ichthyotitan, itself a formidable predator capable of reaching approximately 6 meters in length. The pattern continues. One specimen preserved evidence of Clitestes, a smaller mosasaur and an active predator in its own right. Another discovery documented remains belonging to a plesiosaur, published by Michael Everhart in 2005. This fossil provided the first direct evidence of a mosasaur preying upon a plesiosaur. The significance rests not in a single dramatic encounter, but in accumulation. Each specimen contributes another piece of the same picture. Tylosaurus was not feeding at the edge of the food web, it was feeding within its highest levels. The ocean surrounding it reflected that complexity. Archelon moved through these waters, the largest confirmed sea turtle in Earth's history, growing to approximately 4.5 meters in length. Xiphactinus pursued prey with astonishing aggression, one famous fossil preserving a fish still lodged inside its body, swallowed moments before death. Marine crocodilians cruised through coastal regions with blade-like teeth adapted for capturing large prey. Long-necked reptiles, sharks, diving birds, and mosasaurs shared the same sea, creating a predator community dense enough that the distinction between hunter and hunted often shifted from encounter to encounter. In modern oceans, apex predators generally occupy positions separated by geography, specialization, or behavior. The world of Tylosaurus appears different. Here, powerful hunters existed in such abundance that other apex predators became available prey. The food chain did not narrow toward a single dominant species. It remained crowded all the way to the top. Seen against the scale established earlier, Tylosaurus was smaller than the largest estimates for Megalodon, yet size alone conceals part of the story. At 12 to 14 meters, it routinely consumed animals that occupied the highest levels of its ecosystem. The fossil evidence preserves that reality with unusual clarity, leaving behind the portrait of a predator whose menu extended wherever opportunity allowed. In the high Arctic, where glaciers meet dark water and long winters settle over the landscape, layers of stone preserve a chapter of ocean history far older than the world of giant sharks. On the islands of Svalbard, north of mainland Norway, paleontologists working among frozen slopes began uncovering a remarkable collection of marine reptile fossils in the early years of the 21st century. Among them was an animal so imposing that, during excavation, researchers reached for a temporary nickname rather than a formal description. They called it Predator X, not as a scientific classification, but as a simple acknowledgement that the remains hinted at something extraordinary. The animal would later receive its formal name, Plesiosaurus funki, described by Espen Kunsen and colleagues in 2012. It lived roughly 145 to 150 million years ago during the late Jurassic, in oceans that existed long before whales, long before Megalodon, and long before many familiar marine groups had even appeared. By the time its bones settled into sediment, entire future dynasties of ocean predators still lay millions of years ahead. Its body stretched approximately 12 to 15 meters in length and may have weighed around 45 tons, yet measurements alone only begin to describe the impression left by this animal. What draws immediate attention is the skull. Reconstructed estimates place it at approximately 2 meters long, exceeding the height of most adult humans. This was not the length of the creature itself, but only the structure carrying its jaws, teeth, and sensory organs through the water. Attached to that body were 4 enormous flippers, each larger than a grown person. Unlike the sweeping tails that powered many later marine hunters, these limbs generated propulsion through coordinated strokes, allowing bursts of speed and precise control. The entire anatomy appears focused toward a singular purpose. Every proportion, every muscle attachment, every reinforced section of bone points toward an animal designed to close the distance between itself and large prey with overwhelming force. That force becomes even more striking when viewed through biomechanical analysis. Estimates suggest a bite pressure approaching 33,000 pounds per square inch. Such figures exist beyond ordinary experience, describing stresses capable of crushing dense bone and penetrating heavily built skeletons. Comparisons with terrestrial predators help place the number into context. The confirmed bite force of Tyrannosaurus rex, formidable by any standard, falls far below these estimates. Plesiosaurus funke occupied a range where the mechanics of feeding approached the upper limits of what vertebrate jaws appear capable of producing. The comparison with Megalodon is equally revealing. Reconstructions of the giant shark suggest a maximum bite force of approximately 40,000 pounds per square inch. The difference between them narrows considerably when viewed at this scale. Despite existing more than 80 million years earlier, Plesiosaurus fungi operated within the same realm of predatory power, achieving it through a completely different body plan and evolutionary history. The fossil record also hints at a more complicated reality near the top of the Jurassic food web. Certain pliosaur fossils preserve bite marks matching the dimensions and spacing of pliosaur teeth themselves. These traces suggest that encounters between members of the group occasionally ended violently, whether driven by territorial conflict, competition, scavenging, or direct predation. The evidence indicates that even animals occupying the highest levels of their ecosystem were not exempt from becoming targets. In a world of giant hunters, danger existed in every direction. What emerges from these discoveries is not merely the portrait of a single species, but of an entire lineage. The broader pliosaur group remained among the dominant predators of Jurassic oceans for approximately 80 million years. Across spans of time so vast, they almost dissolve into abstraction. Generation followed generation beneath ancient seas, maintaining an unbroken presence near the summit of marine ecosystems. Their reign unfolded in waters no shark would ever know, among coastlines erased long ago, under skies belonging to a different Earth entirely. Within that distant world, Plesiosaurus funke stands as one of the clearest expressions of what the lineage became, a predator shaped by millions of years of refinement into a form built around strength, speed, and an astonishing bite. The story of Mosasaurus hoffmanni begins underground, not in the open sea where it spent its life, but deep within a limestone mine beneath the city of Maastricht in the Netherlands. Long before paleontology existed as a formal science, miners working through ancient rock uncovered a skull unlike anything they had seen before. The discovery occurred in the 18th century, at a time when giant extinct reptiles had not yet entered the public imagination. The bones seemed to belong to something enormous, something difficult to place within any known category of life. Decades later, during the upheaval of the French Revolutionary Wars, that skull became an object of unexpected importance. When French forces captured Maastricht, the fossil drew the attention of military and political leaders. Napoleon ordered it removed and transported to Paris, where it joined the collections of the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle. The journey transformed a buried skeleton into one of the most famous fossils in Europe. What soldiers carried across the continent was the head of an animal now understood to have reached lengths of up to approximately 17 meters, placing it alongside the largest estimates for Megalodon itself. Yet Mosasaurus hoffmanni belonged to a very different branch of life's history. It was not a dinosaur, nor was it a fish. It was a lizard, a distant relative of modern monitor lizards and Komodo dragons. Its ancestors once moved along coastlines on four limbs, living in a world divided between land and sea. Then evolution carried the lineage in a new direction. Within approximately 10 million years of entering marine environments, those coastal reptiles had become some of the largest predators on Earth. The transformation never fully erased their origins. Fossils of mosasaurs preserve small vestigial hip bones buried within the skeleton, quiet reminders of limbs that no longer existed. These structures served little practical purpose in the fully aquatic adults, yet they remained embedded within the body, traces of an earlier chapter written into the anatomy itself. Even at 17 meters in length, the animal carried evidence of where it came from. Unlike sharks or fish, Mosasaurus breathed air. Every dive eventually required a return to the surface. Every hunt unfolded within the limits imposed by lungs rather than gills. This detail adds an interesting texture to its success. The late Cretaceous oceans contained numerous predators competing across vast marine ecosystems, yet an animal dependent on regular surfacing still rose to dominance. The need to breathe did not diminish its effectiveness. If anything, it highlights how capable the lineage had become. Recent studies have added further detail to that picture. Analysis of preserved melanosomes, microscopic structures associated with pigmentation, revealed a color pattern remarkably similar to that seen in modern pelagic hunters. Darker tones covered the upper body, while lighter coloration extended across the underside. This arrangement, known as countershading, reduces visibility in open water. Viewed from above, the darker back blends into deeper water below. Viewed from beneath, the lighter underside merges with sunlight filtering from the surface. The evidence suggests an animal adapted not for reefs or coastal ambushes, but for pursuit across open seas. Its mouth reinforced that interpretation. Mosasaurus hoffmanni carried approximately 250 teeth, arranged in an intricate system extending beyond the main jaws. Additional teeth lined bones within the roof of the mouth, creating a secondary gripping surface behind the primary bite. Once prey entered that structure, escape became increasingly difficult. Each movement deeper into the mouth brought it into contact with more teeth, guiding it inward rather than allowing retreat. Seen through the lens of deep time, the achievement remains striking. A lineage of lizards entered the sea, and within a comparatively brief evolutionary span, produced predators matching the upper size range of Megalodon. They crossed entire oceans, surfaced beneath Cretaceous skies, and dominated marine ecosystems tens of millions of years before the first giant shark appeared. Their bones preserve the memory of that transformation, suspended between land and sea, ancestry and adaptation, carrying both histories at once. Some discoveries arrive quickly, revealed by a single outcrop or a fortunate excavation. Others remain hidden behind distance, weather, and geography, waiting so long that their absence quietly shapes scientific expectations. Deep within northeastern British Columbia, along a remote canyon carved by the Sakani Chief River, one such discovery rested in stone. The location was so difficult to reach that years passed between the initial recognition of its significance and the completion of a full scientific excavation. By the time the work was finished in the early years of the 21st century, researchers had uncovered evidence of an animal that altered the scale of what seemed possible for its entire group. The fossil belonged to Shonisaurus sikaniensis, an ichthyosaur from the late Triassic, long before giant sharks, before whales, and before many familiar marine ecosystems emerged. This animal moved through ancient seas approximately 210 million years ago. It existed nearly 190 million years before the first appearance of Megalodon, occupying a world separated from that future predator by spans of time so vast that entire evolutionary dynasties rose and vanished in between. When Elizabeth Nichols and Makoto Manabe formally described the specimen in 2004, the dimensions immediately drew attention. The excavated individual measured approximately 21 meters in length. Even among giant marine reptiles, this represented exceptional scale. The difference becomes clearer when placed beside the largest estimates for Megalodon. Shonisaurus extended roughly 3 meters beyond the giant shark's maximum confirmed size, not as a speculative possibility, but as a measurement grounded in an actual skeleton. Scale often slips away when reduced to numbers alone. Imagine a standard swimming pool, 25 meters long. Shonisaurus sicaniensis would occupy nearly the entire distance from one end to the other. A megalodon placed beside it would appear immense by any ordinary standard, yet still leave visible space at both ends. The comparison is not intended to diminish the shark. It simply reveals that the ocean had already produced animals operating within a larger category of size long before its arrival. The broader ichthyosaur lineage makes that achievement even more remarkable. Their ancestors began as land reptiles, descendants of creatures that once moved across solid ground. They entered the oceans during the early Triassic, in the aftermath of the Permian extinction, when ecosystems around the world were rebuilding from one of the most severe biological crises in Earth's history. Within only a few million years, these newcomers had already reached lengths approaching 15 meters. Over the following tens of millions of years, evolution continued refining their design until forms such as Shonisaurus emerged. That design remains one of the most elegant examples of convergent evolution ever documented. The body was streamlined and tapered, equipped with 4 flippers and a powerful vertical tail fluke. Seen in silhouette, it resembles a modern dolphin so closely that the relationship appears obvious at first glance. Yet dolphins would not exist for another 200 million years. The resemblance emerged independently. Faced with the same physical demands of moving efficiently through water, evolution arrived at nearly the same solution twice. The commitment of ichthyosaurs to marine life extended far beyond body shape. Fossils of pregnant females preserve unborn young still within the body cavity, confirming that they gave birth in open water rather than returning to land. Their entire reproductive cycle unfolded at sea. More recent studies of bone microstructure indicate elevated metabolic rates consistent with warm-blooded physiology, allowing sustained activity in environments where slower metabolisms might struggle. Every available line of evidence points toward animals that had fully abandoned their terrestrial past. By the time Shonisaurus sicaniensis appeared, that transformation was complete. It carried no visible reminder of shorelines left behind, only the accumulated refinements of a lineage shaped by millions of years in open water. Among complete and near-complete ichthyosaur fossils, it remains the largest confirmed example yet discovered, a giant emerging from a remote canyon to reveal just how far the ocean's experiments with scale had already progressed. Sometimes an animal enters science not through a complete skeleton or a dramatic excavation, but through fragments so isolated that their significance is difficult to recognize at first. Along the coast of Somerset, where cliffs face the waters of the Bristol Channel and tides steadily wear away ancient rock, a story began with a single piece of bone emerging slowly from stone. It was the sort of discovery that could easily have been overlooked, one weathered fragment among countless others exposed by erosion over the centuries. In 2016, fossil enthusiast Paul de la Salle noticed something unusual projecting from the cliff face. The object proved to be part of an enormous jawbone. Recognizing its potential importance, he contacted paleontologist Dean Lomax, beginning a scientific investigation that would unfold over several years. At the time, the specimen was intriguing but incomplete, a solitary clue from a much larger puzzle hidden within the geological record. The second piece arrived unexpectedly. In 2020, a father and daughter, Justin and Ruby Reynolds, were exploring a different stretch of the same coastline. They had previously read Dean Lomax's work describing the earlier discovery and carried that knowledge with them. During their search, they encountered another immense jaw fragment emerging from rock approximately 10 kilometers west of the first site. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. What they had found appeared connected to the earlier specimen, separated by distance but preserved within the same ancient formation. Careful analysis eventually confirmed the connection. The size, shape, geological age, and anatomical details of the fragments pointed toward a single species. In 2024, Lomax and colleagues formally described the animal in the journal PLOS 1, giving it the name Ichthyotitan severnensis. The name translates roughly as giant fish lizard of the Severn, a title reflecting both its immense scale and the region where its remains were discovered. What makes the discovery so remarkable is how much information emerged from relatively limited material. The more complete jaw fragment exceeds 2 meters in length on its own. By comparing its proportions with those of related ichthyosaurs, researchers estimated a total body length of approximately 25 meters. That figure places the animal beyond the dimensions of every predator discussed so far. Compared with Megalodon at its largest confirmed estimates, the difference approaches 7 meters. A modern great white shark could fit comfortably within that gap alone. Yet even that immense number may not represent the full story. Histological examination of the bone, the microscopic study of its growth structure, revealed a detail of particular importance. The individual from which the jaw came had not finished growing. Growth patterns preserved within the tissue indicate an animal still adding size at the time of its death. The 25-meter estimate, therefore, belongs not to a fully mature giant, but to an individual that had not yet reached its final dimensions. The ultimate adult size remains unknown. Dean Lomax later described the discovery as being beyond their wildest dreams. The phrase carries unusual weight, coming from a paleontologist accustomed to large fossils and unexpected finds. It reflects the scale of the gap between expectation and reality. For decades, the upper limits of ichthyosaur size seemed relatively well understood. Then, 2 isolated jaw fragments from the English coast quietly suggested that those limits had been set too low. The age of the animal deepens the sense of perspective. Ichthyotitan severnensis lived approximately 202 million years ago, around 180 million years before Megalodon appeared. It swam through Triassic seas while the continents were still assembling into arrangements very different from those familiar today. Many ecosystems that would later define the Mesozoic world had not yet fully emerged. The reign of giant dinosaurs on land still lay largely ahead. From only a handful of bones, an entirely new giant entered the history of life, extending the known boundaries of marine reptile size and reminding us that even after centuries of fossil collecting, the ocean's past continues to reveal animals larger than anyone expected. Size leaves an obvious impression in the fossil record. A giant vertebra, an immense jawbone, or a skeleton stretching across a museum hall can be measured immediately. Perception is different. The senses of extinct animals rarely fossilize in a direct way. Sight, hearing, and awareness usually disappear with the soft tissues that produced them, leaving only indirect traces behind. Yet, among the ichthyosaurs, one aspect of perception survived in stone with unusual clarity, preserved so precisely that it allows a glimpse into how these animals experienced a world far beyond the reach of sunlight. Ophthalmosaurus eisenicus lived approximately 160 million years ago during the Jurassic. Compared with some of the giants already encountered, it was relatively modest in size, reaching about 6 meters in length. Its significance lies elsewhere. Within its skull sat the most extreme eyes ever confirmed in any known animal, living or extinct. Each eye measured approximately 23 centimeters in diameter. The scale becomes easier to appreciate when imagined beside a large dinner plate. These were not proportionally large eyes by a small margin. They represented the outer limits of visual investment known from the fossil record. No confirmed animal from any era has surpassed them. The remarkable aspect of this discovery is that the measurement does not depend on speculation. Many ichthyosaur fossils preserve a structure called the sclerotic ring, a circular arrangement of bony plates embedded within the eye. In life, this ring helped maintain the shape of the eyeball under changing pressure conditions. In death, it provided paleontologists with something extremely valuable, a durable anatomical framework from which eye dimensions could be reconstructed with confidence. The fossil itself preserves the evidence. Once researchers understood the size of the eye, attention turned toward its function. Analysis of retinal proportions and optical characteristics suggested adaptation to environments where light was exceptionally scarce. The design appears optimized not for bright surface waters, but for detecting subtle contrasts under conditions approaching total darkness. Such traits point toward deep-diving behavior, perhaps extending to depths of 500 meters or more. At those depths, the familiar brightness of the upper ocean has vanished. Sunlight weakens into a dim blue haze and eventually fades almost completely. Human vision performs poorly in such conditions. Ophthalmosaurus appears to have approached the problem differently. A larger eye gathers more available light before directing it toward the retina. With a diameter of approximately 23 centimeters, the total light collecting area exceeded that of a human eye many times over. Even faint traces of illumination could be captured and processed, transforming darkness into a usable sensory landscape. The image that emerges is striking in its quietness. A marine reptile, the size of a large dolphin descending through cold water, leaving the bright surface behind and entering layers where vision becomes increasingly difficult. There, suspended between darkness above and darkness below, it remained capable of locating movement and contrast that other animals might miss entirely. Other members of the ichthyosaur lineage reveal additional clues about life in these depths. Certain species possessed unusually dense ribs exhibiting pachyostosis, a condition in which bones become thicker and heavier than expected. Rather than representing a disadvantage, this extra mass likely functioned as ballast. Increased skeletal density helped maintain neutral buoyancy, reducing the need for constant swimming effort during deep dives. The body itself became a tool for conserving energy in an environment where efficiency mattered. Taken together, these adaptations suggest that ichthyosaurs occupied sensory territory unlike anything seen today. Modern marine animals possess remarkable visual systems, yet none combine the same anatomical features in quite the same way. For approximately 160 million years, successive generations refined these capabilities beneath ancient seas, developing solutions tailored to a particular world of depth, pressure, and dim light. Their disappearance did not occur because those solutions failed. The oceans changed, and with them the balance of life shifted, carrying new lineages into spaces the ichthyosaurs had occupied for ages beyond easy comprehension. For approximately 160 million years, the ichthyosaurs endured. Generations appeared and vanished beneath changing skies, through shifting coastlines and rearranging continents, yet the lineage remained. Entire groups of marine animals rose around them and disappeared again while they continued their long passage through Earth's history. Their persistence was so extensive that, viewed from a human perspective, it can seem almost permanent. Yet, permanence is rarely found in the ocean's record. Even the most successful dynasties eventually encounter conditions they were not built to withstand. Their disappearance occurred approximately 90 million years ago. This date matters because it places their extinction well before the catastrophe most people associate with the end of the age of reptiles. The asteroid impact that later ended the reign of non-avian dinosaurs still lay roughly 24 million years in the future. The ichthyosaurs did not vanish in that event. By the time it happened, they were already gone. The reasons appear to be rooted not in a single disaster, but in a convergence of environmental pressures unfolding across the middle of the Cretaceous. Oceans warmed significantly during this period. Temperatures shifted across large regions of the globe, altering circulation patterns and changing the structure of marine ecosystems. At the same time, the chemistry of seawater was changing in ways that affected numerous organisms occupying the lower and middle levels of the food web. Among the creatures most affected were ammonites and various cephalopods that had long formed an important part of the ichthyosaur diet. These animals had flourished for millions of years, providing a stable prey base for highly specialized marine hunters. As their abundance declined and distributions shifted, predators dependent upon them faced increasing pressure. The problem was not merely the loss of individual prey species. Entire ecological networks were being reorganized. The ichthyosaurs entered this period carrying the strengths that had made them successful. Their streamlined bodies, sophisticated sensory systems, and deep-diving adaptations had been refined over immense spans of time. Yet, specialization can become a subtle vulnerability. When environments begin changing faster than adaptation can follow, features perfected for one world do not always transfer smoothly into another. At the same time, a different group was expanding. Mosasaurs, descendants of coastal reptiles that had entered marine habitats far more recently, were diversifying rapidly. They spread into ecological roles previously dominated by other predators and increasingly occupied overlapping hunting grounds. Depth ranges intersected. Prey resources overlapped. Encounters became more frequent as both groups drew upon the same broad food supply. The contrast between them is revealing. Ichthyosaurs represented a lineage deeply specialized for marine life, shaped by millions of years of refinement. Mosasaurs approached the ocean differently. They remained air-breathing reptiles, likely possessing lower metabolic demands and a greater degree of ecological flexibility. Rather than excelling within a narrow set of conditions, they appear to have tolerated a wider range of opportunities. Over a span of a few million years, the balance shifted. The disappearance of the ichthyosaurs left vacant spaces throughout marine ecosystems, particularly among large open-water predators. Those vacancies did not remain empty for long. Mosasaurs expanded into them, growing in diversity and abundance as they assumed positions previously held by their predecessors. The transition illustrates a pattern repeated throughout the ocean's history. Dominance alone offers no guarantee of survival. A lineage may thrive for tens of millions of years, refining itself into a highly efficient form, only to find that efficiency tied too closely to conditions that no longer exist. Adaptability, less dramatic but often more durable, can become the deciding factor when environments enter periods of rapid change. Thus, the ichthyosaurs faded from the oceans they had inhabited for longer than any other major marine predator lineage known. Their departure was not marked by a sudden catastrophe visible in a single layer of rock. It unfolded through ecological change, competition, and shifting conditions. When they disappeared, the seas entered a new chapter, populated by hunters shaped according to different rules, carrying a different evolutionary strategy into the waters of the late Cretaceous. A thin layer of sediment appears again and again across the planet. It lies buried beneath forests, deserts, coastlines, and ocean floors, marking a single moment shared by every continent. Within that layer rests an unusual concentration of iridium, an element rare in Earth's crust but common in certain extraterrestrial objects. To geologists, it serves as a timestamp. To paleontologists, it marks one of the sharpest turning points in the history of life. Approximately 66 million years ago, an object between 10 and 15 kilometers in diameter approached Earth. Traveling at roughly 20 kilometers per second, it struck near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. Radiometric dating places the event at approximately 66.038 million years ago, with an uncertainty measured in only thousands of years. Against the backdrop of geological time, that precision is extraordinary. It allows the impact to stand not merely as an era, but as a specific moment. The consequences unfolded in stages. Within hours, material blasted into the atmosphere began falling back toward the planet. This returning debris re-entered at immense speeds, generating intense thermal radiation across large portions of the globe. Forests ignited far from the impact site. Surface waters in nearby regions experienced rapid heating. Energy released in a matter of minutes rivaled processes that normally unfold across immense spans of time. Days later, the oceans carried the disturbance outward. Tsunami waves radiated across entire basins, leaving signatures preserved in sediment thousands of kilometers from the crater itself. Layers of disrupted deposits, scattered marine debris, and unusual grain structures remain visible today, recording the passage of water set in motion by the collision. Yet the most profound effects emerged more slowly. Fine particles injected into the upper atmosphere spread around the planet and lingered there. Over the following months, sunlight reaching the surface diminished dramatically. The brightness sustaining photosynthesis weakened. In oceans as well as on land, the organisms forming the foundation of food webs began to decline. Marine ecosystems are built upward from microscopic producers. Remove that foundation, and the effects travel through every higher level. Small organisms lose their food source. Larger animals lose theirs in turn. The process resembles a structure collapsing from below rather than above. Within years, food chains that had supported enormous marine reptiles, giant ammonites, vast fish populations, and complex predator communities began unraveling. The losses were immense. Mosasaurs vanished. The remaining plesiosaurs disappeared as well. Giant ammonites that had survived for hundreds of millions of years reached their end. Archelon, the largest known sea turtle, was gone. Zephactinus vanished from the record. Predators and prey alike disappeared together because the crisis did not begin with them. It began at the base of the system supporting them all. What had taken approximately 85 million years of Mesozoic evolution to assemble disappeared with startling speed. Entire ecological structures collapsed. Apex predators that had dominated oceans for ages found themselves unable to survive a world where the underlying energy flow had broken apart. Yet extinction was not universal. Small sharks endured, continuing a pattern already established through previous global crises. Small bony fish survived as well. Primitive marine mammals persisted in modest forms. Microscopic organisms remained, along with enough of the lower food web to begin rebuilding. Survival favored flexibility, small size, and the ability to persist through prolonged scarcity. The oceans that emerged afterward felt strangely empty by comparison. For millions of years, no giant marine reptiles patrolled the seas. No dominant macro-predators occupied the highest levels of marine ecosystems. Prey populations expanded into spaces where hunters had vanished. Ecological networks slowly reassembled from surviving fragments, constructing something new from the remains of what had been lost. The reset was not merely biological. It altered the future direction of evolution itself. The oceans continued as they always had, but the cast of dominant animals had changed completely. New opportunities existed where old rulers once stood, and the long process of filling those spaces had already begun. Names can preserve old mistakes long after the mistakes themselves have been corrected. Basilosaurus is one such case. The name means king lizard, a title inherited from a misunderstanding that occurred during the early days of paleontology. When its fossils were first uncovered in Alabama during the 1830s, the bones seemed unlike anything known. They were immense, elongated, and strangely serpentine. To anatomist Richard Harlan, the remains appeared reptilian. He concluded they belonged to a giant marine reptile and gave them a name that survives to this day. Later discoveries revealed the truth. The animal was not a reptile at all. It was a whale, one of the earliest fully aquatic cetaceans ever known. Its existence represents one of the most remarkable transformations in vertebrate history. The lineage began on land. Roughly 15 million years earlier, the ancestors of whales were small mammals moving through riverbanks and coastal environments. Fossils from Pakistan, Egypt, and North America preserve this transition with unusual clarity. Pakicetus lived a largely terrestrial life, though already associated with water. Ambulocetus spent more time swimming, moving through aquatic habitats with a body reminiscent of a giant amphibious hunter. Rhodocetus carried reduced hind limbs and increasingly relied upon tail-driven locomotion. Dorodon became fully aquatic, possessing a body shape recognizable as whale-like. Then came Basilosaurus, a creature representing not merely adaptation to the sea, but complete commitment to it. At approximately 17 to 20 meters in length, Basilosaurus rivaled many of the giant marine predators that came long before and long after, yet its appearance differed from any whale alive today. Rather than the compact, torpedo-shaped form familiar from modern species, its body stretched into an elongated profile capable of pronounced side-to-side undulation. It moved through water with a flexibility that modern whales largely lack. Ancient observers who imagined sea serpents were not entirely disconnected from reality. The silhouette of Basilosaurus would have appeared strikingly different from the whales now inhabiting Earth's oceans. Despite spending millions of years as a fully aquatic animal, traces of its terrestrial ancestry remained visible. Fossils preserve tiny hind limbs approximately 60 centimeters long. These legs were too small to contribute meaningfully to movement and no longer connected to the spine in a way that could support walking. They served little practical purpose, yet persisted as evolutionary remnants carried forward from distant ancestors that once crossed dry ground. Its teeth provide another glimpse into a world unlike the modern oceans. Contemporary whales generally occupy one of two strategies. Baleen whales filter small prey from seawater, while toothed whales seize prey but swallow it largely intact. Basilosaurus followed neither pattern. It possessed differentiated teeth, including incisors for grasping and multicusped molars capable of processing food. It could bite, tear, and chew. The feeding machinery resembled that of a terrestrial mammal carried into a marine setting rather than the specialized systems found in whales today. Evidence from Egypt's Wadi al-Hitan, known as the Valley of the Whales, reveals what those teeth were used for. Several Basilosaurus specimens preserve remains of Dorudon within the abdominal region. Dorudon itself was a smaller whale, fully aquatic and successful in its own right. The fossils indicate that Basilosaurus preyed upon it. Within a relatively short evolutionary span, the first fully aquatic whale lineage had already produced a predator capable of hunting other whales. The irony is striking. A group that began as modest land mammals entered the sea and rapidly climbed toward the top of marine food chains. Basilosaurus became one expression of that ascent, a whale large enough to dominate its surroundings while still carrying anatomical echoes of the world it left behind. By approximately 34 million years ago, Basilosaurus disappeared. Yet extinction did not end the story. Before the lineage faded, it had already divided into separate branches. One would eventually give rise to the great baleen whales. The other would produce increasingly sophisticated toothed hunters, carrying forward traits that would shape the next chapter of ocean predator history, long before anyone gave it a name. The remains of Livyatan melvillei rested beneath what is now one of the driest landscapes on Earth. The Pisco and Ica regions of Peru appear today as desert, wind-shaped and sun-bleached, yet the ground preserves the memory of an ocean that once covered the region millions of years ago. In that ancient seabed, a team led by Olivier Lambert uncovered part of a skull and jaw unlike anything expected. Teeth remained locked within the bone, enormous and unmistakable. Even before the animal was formally described, it was clear that this was not merely another fossil whale. It belonged to something occupying the highest levels of the Miocene food web. When the species was named in 2010, the choice reflected its scale. The genus drew inspiration from the Livyatan of ancient scripture, while the species honored Herman Melville, whose fictional whale had already become part of maritime legend. The combination felt appropriate because the animal itself seemed to stand at the boundary where myth and reality often blur. Yet every feature was grounded in fossil evidence, measured, preserved, and documented in stone. Although classified as a sperm whale, Livyatan differed profoundly from the sperm whales that inhabit the oceans today. Modern sperm whales possess functional teeth only in the lower jaw. The upper teeth remain hidden within the gums, never erupting and serving virtually no purpose. Livyatan retained a more formidable arrangement. Its upper and lower jaws both carried large, fully functional teeth designed for active predation. The largest known tooth reached approximately 36 centimeters in length, exceeding the length of a standard ruler. No confirmed animal in Earth's history possessed larger functional teeth. Its body length is estimated between roughly 13.5 and 17.5 meters, placing it within the same general size category occupied by the largest predatory animals of its era. Yet size alone does not explain its position in the ocean. Like modern sperm whales, Livyatan likely possessed an advanced biosonar system. Within the darkness of open water, sound became a form of perception. Focused acoustic pulses moved outward through the sea, returning information from distant objects and animals. The result was a detailed three-dimensional map of the surrounding environment, functioning even where sunlight never reached. At distances extending beyond a kilometer, the ocean itself became readable through echoes. What makes Livyatan especially significant is not simply what it was, but where and when it lived. During the Miocene, the Pacific Ocean contained another giant predator already familiar to this story. Megalodon occupied the same waters. Fossils of both animals have been recovered from overlapping deposits in Peru, preserving evidence of coexistence rather than speculation. These were not creatures separated by geography or time. They shared the same world. For millions of years, the ocean supported two apex macro-predators of extraordinary scale. Both targeted large baleen whales. Both occupied the uppermost levels of the food chain. Yet, their methods could hardly have been more different. Megalodon approached from below and behind, using immense force to cripple fins and tail flukes before delivering fatal bites. Livyatan carried its weaponry directly in front of it. Rows of massive teeth on both jaws allowed attacks delivered head-on, with crushing precision and remarkable control. The same prey moved through waters patrolled by two very different hunters. The result was an ocean unlike the modern one. No living sea contains an equivalent pairing of giant predators competing at such a scale for the same resource. Livyatan was not a lesser companion to Megalodon, nor a footnote beside it. It was a rival, occupying the same stage, shaped by the same environment, and powerful enough to stand among the most formidable hunters the ocean has ever produced. There are moments in Earth's history when an ecosystem becomes so crowded with successful predators that the usual idea of an apex begins to lose meaning. The Miocene Pacific was one of those moments. Between roughly 10 and 8 million years ago, vast stretches of ocean supported an abundance of large hunters, unmatched in any confirmed marine ecosystem before or since. The remarkable feature was not the existence of a single dominant predator. It was the number of powerful animals occupying the same waters at the same time, each pursuing its own strategy, each drawing energy from an ocean rich enough to sustain them all. The familiar giants of this age were already moving through those seas. Megalodon patrolled warm waters with a body designed for overwhelming force. Livyatan searched the depths with sound, carrying the largest functional teeth ever known. Yet around these giants existed an entire supporting cast of predators that transformed the Miocene into something uniquely dense and complex. Among them was Zygophocitor veroli, a raptorial sperm whale described in 2006. At approximately 6.5 meters in length, it was far smaller than Livyatan, yet still formidable. Unlike modern sperm whales, it possessed functional teeth in both jaws, allowing it to actively seize and process large prey. Its body suggests a pursuit hunter, agile enough to chase fast-moving animals through open water. Sharing the same broad ecosystem was Acrophyseter, another toothed sperm whale from the fossil-rich deposits of Peru. Measuring roughly 4 meters in length, it occupied a different scale, yet belonged to the same predatory tradition. Together, these whales reveal that the raptorial sperm whale lineage was not represented by a single giant species. It was a diverse guild of hunters, filling multiple ecological roles across the ocean. The sharks were equally varied. Several large mako species occupied the open sea, combining speed, endurance, and elevated body temperatures that allowed efficient pursuit in a range of conditions. They moved through the same thermal corridors as whales and other large prey, forming part of a predator community already crowded with specialists. One of the most distinctive among them was Hemipristis sera. Reaching approximately 3 meters in length, it carried serrated teeth uniquely suited for slicing through thick layers of whale blubber. Rather than competing directly with every predator around it, Hemipristis occupied a narrower niche, demonstrating how specialization could thrive when prey was abundant and ecological opportunities were plentiful. The foundation supporting this extraordinary concentration of hunters was not the predators themselves, but the prey. Baleen whales existed across an enormous size range, from species measuring only a few meters to giants approaching 25 or even 30 meters. Their numbers appear to have been sufficient to sustain multiple large predators simultaneously without pushing the system toward collapse. Energy flowed upward through the food web on a scale rarely seen in marine history. Even the birds seem almost improbable. Ichthyotitan selassie, a giant penguin formally described in 2007, stood approximately 1.5 meters tall. Unlike modern penguins associated with icy waters, this species lived in tropical environments. Its fossils occur within the same Peruvian deposits that preserve evidence of both Megalodon and Livyatan. The image is striking, not because it is imagined, but because it is real. Tropical shorelines hosted giant penguins, while enormous sharks and predatory whales occupied nearby waters. Taken together, the Miocene Pacific appears less like a conventional ecosystem and more like an evolutionary peak built from overlapping opportunities. No other confirmed period in Earth's history contains evidence for two apex macro-predators exceeding 15 meters in length competing so directly for the same prey under the same conditions. Other eras produced giants. Other eras produced complex food webs, yet this particular combination remains unique. For a time, the system held. Predators flourished, prey remained abundant, and the ocean supported a concentration of large animals unlike anything alive today. Beneath that apparent stability, however, the conditions sustaining the entire structure were already beginning to change, slowly reshaping the future of the sea. The end did not arrive as a collision from space, nor as a sudden catastrophe visible in a single day. Instead, it began with water changing course. Around 5 million years ago, a slow rearrangement of the planet altered the circulation of entire oceans. The Isthmus of Panama rose and closed the marine connection between the Atlantic and Pacific. Currents that had flowed freely for millions of years were redirected. Heat distribution changed. The world entered a cooling trend that would continue reshaping marine ecosystems long after it began. At first, the transformation would have seemed subtle. Temperatures drifted downward across vast regions. Seasonal patterns shifted. Cold water gradually expanded into areas that had once remained consistently warm. Yet for animals occupying the highest levels of the food web, small environmental changes often carry disproportionate consequences. Their lives depend not only on climate, but on the movement of prey, the structure of habitats, and the stability of entire ecological networks. Megalodon was particularly vulnerable to such changes because it was a specialist. Although capable of crossing immense distances, it remained closely associated with warm, coastal, and subtropical waters. These environments supported the baleen whales upon which it depended. For millions of years, predator and prey moved through a relatively stable system. As cooling intensified, that stability began to dissolve. Many baleen whale populations gradually shifted toward colder, higher latitude regions. Rich feeding grounds developed in areas increasingly influenced by nutrient-laden currents and seasonal productivity. The whales followed those opportunities. Megalodon could not follow as effectively. The giant shark's range began to contract as suitable warm water habitats became less extensive. The distances between predator and prey widened. Recent research has sharpened the timeline of what happened next. A study published in 2023 by Sven Bahn and colleagues suggests that Megalodon's extinction occurred approximately 3.6 million years ago. The evidence indicates that the disappearance was not an endlessly prolonged decline stretching across millions of years. Geologically speaking, it appears relatively abrupt. A predator that had dominated marine ecosystems for roughly 20 million years vanished within a surprisingly narrow window of time. What makes the event even more significant is that Megalodon did not disappear alone. The same environmental changes affected much of the broader Miocene predator community. Livyatan vanished as well. The remarkable lineage of raptorial sperm whales faded from the record. Other specialized predators declined alongside them. The ecosystem described in earlier chapters of this story, crowded with competing giants, fragmented and collapsed as conditions changed beyond the limits that had sustained it. The consequences extended far beyond the loss of a single species. Research published in 2023 by Catalina Pimiento and colleagues modeled the ecological effects of Megalodon's extinction and concluded that the disappearance likely altered the community structure of a large proportion of marine species interacting with it. Removing a hyper-apex predator changes more than the top of the food chain. It changes how prey move, where competitors feed, and which evolutionary strategies succeed. Among the greatest beneficiaries were the baleen whales themselves. For millions of years, they had existed under intense predation pressure from predators capable of attacking healthy adults. With Megalodon gone and other giant competitors disappearing alongside it, a new ecological opportunity emerged. Whale populations expanded into colder waters and began exploring size ranges previously constrained by the risks of carrying so much mass through oceans patrolled by enormous hunters. Over the next several million years, that shift accumulated. Generation after generation grew within a world fundamentally different from the one their ancestors had known. The evolutionary trajectory led steadily toward greater size, greater efficiency, and access to feeding grounds, extending across entire ocean basins. One absence remains particularly striking. Since Megalodon's extinction, no solitary marine predator has replaced it. Orcas hunt whales successfully, but they do so cooperatively, relying on intelligence and group behavior. The ecological role occupied by a single giant hunter, capable of routinely targeting healthy adult baleen whales, has remained vacant for approximately 3.6 million years. The disappearance of Megalodon was therefore not merely an ending, it was a release of ecological pressure that opened pathways unavailable before, reshaping the future of the ocean in ways still visible today. Far from any coastline, beyond shipping lanes, and beneath skies that may hold no sign of land in any direction, there is an animal moving through the ocean tonight that outweighs every predator, every reptile, every fish, and every whale that has appeared in this story. It does not carry enormous teeth. It does not hunt other giants. It does not sit at the top of a food chain in the way earlier rulers of the sea once did. Yet, by the simple measure of physical scale, nothing in Earth's confirmed history has surpassed it. The blue whale, Balaenoptera musculus, reaches lengths of approximately 33 meters and weights approaching 190 tons. Those numbers place it beyond every confirmed marine giant known from the fossil record. Larger than the immense ichthyosaurs that crossed Triassic oceans. Larger than the great reptiles of the Jurassic and Cretaceous. Larger than the most ambitious estimates for Megalodon. Larger than every animal whose bones, teeth, or jaws have appeared throughout this journey. Its existence becomes even more remarkable when considered alongside its feeding strategy. The largest animal ever confirmed does not achieve its size by hunting large prey. Instead, it feeds upon krill, small crustaceans measuring only a few centimeters in length. During feeding, the whale opens its mouth and engulfs enormous volumes of seawater. Baleen plates hanging from the upper jaw act as a filtration system, allowing water to escape while retaining dense concentrations of prey. Vast size is sustained not by consuming giant animals, but by harvesting immense quantities of some of the smallest, abundant organisms in the ocean. This contrast reveals something important about evolution in the sea. Predatory power and body size are not the same measure. Earlier sections have explored animals that dominated through force, speed, or weaponry. The blue whale follows a different path. Its achievement is scale itself, the accumulation of mass on a level never documented elsewhere in the history of life. Inside that immense body are structures whose dimensions seem almost detached from ordinary experience. The heart weighs approximately 180 kilograms, comparable to the combined mass of 2 adult humans. Blood moves through arteries of extraordinary diameter. The aorta is so wide that a small child could pass through it. Each heartbeat sends oxygen and nutrients through a body longer than many buildings. Sound plays an equally important role in its existence. Blue whale vocalizations can reach approximately 188 decibels, among the most powerful biological sounds ever recorded. These low-frequency calls travel across enormous distances, moving through ocean basins and remaining detectable thousands of kilometers away. In a world where visibility is often limited, communication unfolds through pressure waves, passing silently through water. The path leading to the blue whale was shaped, in part, by the disappearance of the predators that once constrained its ancestors. After Megalodon vanished approximately 3.6 million years ago, baleen whales experienced a fundamentally different ecological landscape. The most formidable solitary hunter of large whales no longer existed. Over succeeding millions of years, baleen whale lineages expanded into colder waters and evolved toward increasingly greater sizes. The blue whale emerged from that trajectory. In a direct evolutionary sense, its existence is linked to the absence of the giant shark that once dominated the seas. Yet the story does not end with triumph. Before industrial whaling, blue whale populations are estimated to have approached 250,000 individuals worldwide. Today, estimates generally range between 10,000 and 25,000. Within little more than a century, a species that had become the largest animal in Earth's history experienced a decline measured in roughly 90% of its population. The result is a quiet and remarkable reality. The greatest animal ever known is not a fossil. It is not a reconstruction assembled from fragments of bone. It is alive, moving through the ocean at this moment, carrying within its existence both the immense creative power of evolution and the fragile consequences of recent history. A fossil is often imagined as an ending, a bone buried, a tooth preserved, a final fragment left behind by a vanished world. Yet the fossil record behaves less like a cemetery and more like an unfinished manuscript. Each year, new discoveries alter details once considered settled. Entire branches of ocean history emerge from obscurity. Species appear where none were expected. Old assumptions narrow, expand, or disappear. The remarkable pattern is that these revisions rarely make the ancient ocean seem smaller. They almost always make it larger, stranger, and more complex. Only recently, the giant ichthyosaur, known as Ichthyotitan severnensis, entered the scientific record. Formally described in 2024, it is known from only 2 jawbone fragments discovered along the coast of England. Even from such incomplete remains, researchers estimated a body length of approximately 25 meters. More striking still, microscopic examination of the bone revealed that the individual was still growing when it died. The estimate applies not to a fully mature animal, but to one that had not yet finished developing. The upper limit remains unknown, suspended beyond the edges of available evidence. The same period brought new insight into Megalodon itself. In 2023, carbon, nitrogen, and zinc isotope studies, led by Jeremy McCormack and colleagues, provided the clearest confirmation yet of the shark's ecological position. By examining chemical signatures preserved within fossil teeth, researchers demonstrated that Megalodon occupied a feeding level above any living marine predator. The giant shark was not simply large. It existed at an unusually elevated position within its ecosystem, reshaping how scientists understand its role in the Miocene Ocean. That same year, Catalina Pimiento and her collaborators approached a different question. Rather than studying Megalodon as an isolated animal, they examined what happened after it disappeared. Their quantitative modeling suggested that its extinction affected a far greater portion of marine ecosystems than previously recognized. Species interactions shifted across entire food webs. The loss of a single predator echoed through communities on a scale difficult to appreciate from fossils alone. In 2022, another discovery widened the boundaries of what marine reptiles were believed capable of doing. A newly described plesiosaur from Patagonia showed adaptations consistent with life in freshwater river environments. For generations, large plesiosaurs had been viewed almost exclusively through the lens of marine habitats. This animal revealed a different possibility. Some members of the group appear to have ventured far inland, occupying ecosystems previously absent from the known record. The surprises extend even further back in time. In 2019, researchers reported extraordinary preservation in a Carboniferous shark, approximately 325 million years old. Sharks are notoriously difficult to preserve because their skeletons consist largely of cartilage. Yet this specimen retained details of body shape, fin structure, and skin pigmentation. Features once believed impossible to recover from such ancient animals emerged directly from the rock, carrying information that had survived for hundreds of millions of years. Meanwhile, another frontier is opening at the edge of Antarctica. Coastal exposures becoming accessible as ice retreats are revealing fossils from polar ecosystems scarcely represented in previous research. Mosasaurs and plesiosaurs from ancient Antarctic seas are beginning to emerge, offering glimpses of marine worlds that remained hidden beneath ice for most of scientific history. Entire communities are appearing almost for the first time. Even with these discoveries, an enormous limitation remains. The open ocean preserves very little of itself. Animals living far from shore often die in environments where burial is unlikely and fossilization rarer still. Sediment accumulates most effectively in certain settings, leaving vast pelagic regions underrepresented across nearly every geological era. Countless creatures may have spent their entire existence in waters that left almost no trace. This creates an unusual tension within paleontology. The fossil record is incomplete, yet it continually reveals unexpected abundance whenever new evidence appears. Each field season adds another fragment. Each fragment expands the picture. What we know about the prehistoric ocean is substantial, but it remains a provisional map of a much larger territory, one still emerging from stone, cliff faces, riverbanks, and ancient seabeds scattered across the world. Long before teeth met flesh or jaws closed around prey, an older contest was already underway. It unfolded in darkness, distance, vibration, chemistry, and sound. The great predators that have drifted through this story were not defined solely by length or weight. Their true advantage lay in perception, in the hidden instruments they carried within their bodies, each one tuned to a particular version of the ocean. Across millions of years, evolution refined these instruments with extraordinary precision, shaping creatures that could detect signals invisible to almost everything around them. The history of marine apex predators is therefore also a history of senses, of increasingly sophisticated ways to interpret a world that often concealed more than it revealed. Among the mosasaurs, the ocean was read through a combination of vision and chemistry. Fossil skulls reveal forward-facing eyes that provided overlapping fields of view, granting a degree of binocular depth perception unusual among reptiles. In the shifting light of the late Cretaceous sea, this allowed distances to be judged with remarkable accuracy during the final moments of an attack. Yet sight was only part of the system. Like their modern lizard relatives, mosasaurs possessed a Jacobson's organ within the roof of the mouth. Molecules suspended in seawater could be sampled and interpreted, transforming the water column into a vast landscape of chemical information. A prey animal moving far beyond visual range still left traces of its existence behind. The predator did not simply see its surroundings, it tasted them. Elsewhere in time, the ichthyosaurs followed a different path. In Ophthalmosaurus, the eye itself became one of the most extreme sensory structures ever known. Measuring approximately 23 centimeters across, each eye was supported by a robust ring of bone that preserved its dimensions in the fossil record with unusual clarity. These immense organs gathered light across an area roughly 80 times larger than a human eye. At depths approaching 500 meters, where sunlight faded into near invisibility, that advantage became transformative. Tiny contrasts remained detectable. Motion could still be separated from darkness. An environment nearly blind to other creatures remained accessible to an ichthyosaur. When early whales entered the ocean, they carried another inheritance from land. Basilosaurus and its relatives possessed differentiated teeth with distinct forms adapted for grasping, puncturing, and processing prey. This arrangement linked sensation directly to feeding. The mouth itself became a sophisticated interface between predator and prey, capable of handling information through pressure, position, and resistance. Modern whales have largely abandoned this system, but in these ancient forms, it remained central to survival. Later, within Livyatan melville, perception expanded into an entirely different realm. Descended from the lineage that produced living sperm whales, Livyatan almost certainly possessed biosonar. Focused pulses of sound traveled outward through seawater, striking distant objects before returning as echoes. Those echoes were received and interpreted through specialized structures connected to the lower jaw and skull. Darkness became largely irrelevant. Shape, distance, movement, and direction could be reconstructed acoustically across more than a kilometer of ocean. The surrounding environment became a three-dimensional map built from sound alone. Megalodon carried yet another suite of abilities. Electroreceptive organs detected faint electrical fields generated by muscle activity within nearby animals. The lateral line sensed pressure changes and movement through the water itself. Powerful olfactory systems identified chemical traces at extraordinarily low concentrations. Together, these senses formed a layered picture of the environment, combining information from multiple sources into a single predatory awareness. Across every era, larger bodies were accompanied by deeper perception. The giants of the ocean evolved not only greater scale, but increasingly refined ways of reading the world around them. Many of those systems vanished with the animals that carried them, while others survive only in diminished descendants. Yet their traces remain, preserved in bone, tooth, and anatomy, offering brief glimpses into sensory worlds that science is still learning how to imagine. A pattern only becomes visible when enough time has passed. A single predator can appear unique, an isolated masterpiece shaped by circumstances that will never repeat. Yet, when the span stretches across 500 million years, individual stories begin to overlap. The names change, the bodies change, entire oceans vanish and reform, but certain mechanisms return again and again with remarkable consistency. The creatures that dominated their worlds were separated by vast gulfs of time, yet the forces that elevated them and eventually removed them followed familiar paths, as though the ocean were working from a limited set of rules written deep into the structure of life itself. One of those rules is the paradox of specialization. The most successful predators often become exquisitely adapted to a particular prey, environment, or climatic condition. For long periods, this appears to be an unbeatable strategy. Megalodon flourished in warm seas rich with large whales. The great Ichthyosaurs evolved within a marine world whose chemistry and ecology remained stable for immense stretches of time. Success encouraged further refinement. Every generation became slightly better suited to the circumstances surrounding it, yet perfection carries a hidden cost. When conditions eventually shift, highly specialized organisms have fewer options available to them. The traits that once guaranteed dominance can become constraints. Evolution produces extraordinary efficiency, but efficiency is often achieved by sacrificing flexibility. Across the fossil record, peak adaptation repeatedly reveals itself as a form of vulnerability. A second pattern unfolds more quietly. Not every dynasty ends through violence or catastrophe. Sometimes a rival arrives and simply proves more adaptable. The decline of the ichthyosaurs illustrates this process with particular clarity. Their disappearance was not the result of a single, dramatic confrontation. Instead, mosasaurs expanded into similar ecological spaces, exploiting opportunities with greater versatility. Over millions of years, the balance shifted. One lineage gradually faded while another rose beside it. The ocean often replaces its rulers through overlap rather than replacement, through competition, measured not in moments but in geological ages. A third pattern emerges whenever the planet itself changes abruptly. Mass extinctions have repeatedly erased established hierarchies and reset entire ecosystems. Dominance provides no protection from such events. The Mosasaurs ruled the late Cretaceous Sea with extraordinary success, yet the catastrophe that ended their world paid no attention to evolutionary achievement. Across multiple extinction events, apex predators disappeared alongside countless smaller organisms. Afterwards, the oceans remained, but their communities were rebuilt from surviving fragments. Again and again, life reconstructed new food webs and produced new giants from whatever lineages endured. Closely connected to this is a fourth recurring mechanism, the collapse of prey. Predators exist within networks, not in isolation. Remove the foundation, and the structure above it weakens rapidly. The extinction of Megalodon illustrates this principle especially well, as climatic changes altered ocean circulation and whale distributions. The prey base supporting the great shark began to shift beyond its reach. Similar processes echoed through earlier eras. When primary productivity faltered or food chains fractured, even the largest hunters struggled to persist. Across hundreds of millions of years, prey collapse remains one of the most reliable pathways through which apex predators disappear. The fifth pattern may be the most surprising. Repeatedly, the ocean has recruited its rulers from the land. Ichthyosaurs, Mosasaurus, and whales all began as four-limbed terrestrial animals. Each lineage approached the shoreline from a different evolutionary direction. Each entered marine environments at a different moment in history, yet each eventually produced formidable predators that came to dominate vast stretches of ocean. The process occurred independently multiple times, suggesting that whenever ecological opportunity emerged, evolution responded with remarkable creativity. Shorelines became thresholds through which entirely new dynasties entered the sea. Viewed together, these patterns feel less like historical curiosities and more like enduring principles. They governed ancient oceans populated by creatures now known only through stone, and they continue to shape the living ocean today. The actors change, the rules remain. Far below the waves, beyond the reach of storms, seasons, and sunlight, the ocean becomes a different world. Temperatures settle into a narrow range. Darkness becomes permanent. Biological rhythms slow. Across the immense history traced through this story, that stability has carried unusual consequences. While catastrophes repeatedly transformed surface ecosystems, the deep sea often endured with greater continuity. Sediment cores recovered from ancient marine deposits reveal a recurring pattern after major extinction events. Diversity declined almost everywhere, yet communities living at depth frequently retained a larger proportion of survivors than those inhabiting the brighter waters above. The ocean's deepest regions did not escape disaster entirely, but they experienced it differently, sheltered by distance, pressure, and the insulating weight of water itself. That refuge can still be seen today in creatures that seem to carry distant ages within their anatomy. Among the most remarkable is the coelacanth, a lobe-finned fish whose body plan reaches back approximately 400 million years. For decades, paleontologists believed the lineage had vanished alongside countless other ancient forms. Fossils suggested an absence extending roughly 66 million years into the past. Then, in the year 1938, a living specimen appeared off the coast of South Africa. The discovery felt less like finding a new species than encountering a survivor from a chapter long assumed complete. Its fleshy fins, ancient skeletal architecture, and slow movements preserved features that had once existed alongside some of the earliest vertebrate experiments on Earth. Not far away in evolutionary terms, though inhabiting a different branch of the tree of life, the frilled shark offers another glimpse into deep time. Descending through waters hundreds of meters beneath the surface, it carries 6 gill slits rather than the more familiar arrangement seen in most living sharks. Its elongated body and distinctive jaws closely resemble forms known from the fossil record tens of millions of years ago. Modern oceans still contain this animal, moving through darkness between roughly 200 and 1,500 meters below the surface, largely unchanged, while entire predator dynasties rose and disappeared above it. The nautilus presents a quieter example of persistence. Its spiral shell recalls relatives that once flourished across ancient seas in astonishing abundance. Some ammonite lineages reached sizes measured in meters and occupied ecological roles, spanning vast portions of the marine world. Those forms vanished, yet the nautilus endured. Now largely confined to depths between approximately 150 and 600 meters, it continues a lineage that has survived every mass extinction since the Ordovician. Each slow movement through the water carries the legacy of an unimaginably long continuity. Even among animals that appear familiar through legend and folklore, the deep sea still guards surprises. The giant squid remained known primarily through fragments, stranded carcasses, and the stomach contents of sperm whales for centuries. Scientists understood it existed, yet no one had observed it alive in its natural habitat until the early years of the present century. The first successful photographs arrived in 2004. The first video followed in 2006. Larger still is the colossal squid, an animal possessing eyes approximately 30 centimeters across, the largest known in any living creature. Although formally described in the early 20th century, a complete adult specimen was not recovered until 2007. What makes these stories especially remarkable is that they emerge from a realm still largely unexplored. Beneath 200 meters, marine scientists estimate the existence of roughly 10 million species. Only about 250,000 have been formally described. The gap is not a relic of past ignorance. It exists in the present. The confirmed history of the ocean is already extraordinary, yet beneath the darkness lies a living archive still being uncovered, connected to every vanished sea by the same enduring laws of pressure, energy, adaptation, and time. A dimension written on a page is easy to accept and surprisingly difficult to imagine. Lengths measured in meters, weights measured in tons, skulls measured in centimeters, all remain distant until they are placed beside something familiar. Across this journey, names and numbers have accumulated through hundreds of millions of years of ocean history. Yet the animals themselves occupied real space. They displaced real water. They moved through environments that, despite their age, obeyed the same physical laws that govern the sea today. To understand what these creatures truly were, it helps to step briefly away from statistics and into scale. Consider Megalodon. Reconstructed at approximately 16 to 18 meters in length. Imagine two London double-decker buses placed end to end along a road. The shark would stretch across nearly the same distance. Its dorsal fin alone rose to roughly the height of an average adult human standing upright. When the jaws opened, the space inside the mouth approached the dimensions of a small automobile. What appears in illustrations as a familiar shark shape becomes something profoundly different when translated into everyday objects. It was not merely large. It occupied a volume of space difficult to encounter in any living predator. Tylosaurus followed a different design, but not a smaller presence. Reaching approximately 12 to 14 meters, it exceeded the length of a standard school bus. The distinctive rostrum projecting from the front of its skull accounted for a significant portion of that total length, roughly 15% of the entire animal. Long before the teeth arrived, a solid extension of bone led the way through the water. The proportions created a silhouette unlike anything alive today, a predator whose shape reflected an evolutionary experiment entirely its own. Pliosaurus funke carried its scale in a different direction. The skull alone measured approximately 2 meters. Standing beside it, an adult human would find the head longer than their own height. Behind that skull followed a body weighing an estimated 45 tons, comparable to several adult African elephants combined into a single marine predator. The dimensions become even more striking when considered as one integrated machine. Flippers, muscle, jaws, and mass working together beneath the surface. Mosasaurus hoffmanii occupied a similar overall length to Megalodon, reaching approximately 17 meters, yet the resemblance ended there. This was a reptile carrying roughly 250 teeth, arranged not only along the jaws, but also across the palate. The architecture of the mouth created a structure that functioned almost like a corridor lined with teeth, reducing the chances of escape once prey crossed the threshold. Further back in time, Shonisaurus sicaniensis expanded the scale again. At approximately 21 meters, it approached the length of a standard 25-meter swimming pool. Standing at one end and looking toward the other, there would be little empty space remaining. Megalodon itself, impressive as it was, would appear noticeably smaller by comparison. Then came Ichthyotitan severnensis, estimated at approximately 25 meters from incomplete remains. A jaw fragment exceeding 2 meters hinted at an animal longer than the width of a regulation basketball court. Even more remarkable, microscopic examination of the bone revealed an individual that had not yet finished growing. Livyatan melvili expressed scale through a different measurement. One tooth reached approximately 36 centimeters in length, extending beyond a standard ruler. This was not an ornamental structure or a fragment exaggerated by time. It was a functional tooth, one of many, used repeatedly against prey, measured in tons. Basilosaurus approached Megalodon in total length, approximately 17 to 20 meters, yet distributed that length through an elongated, serpentine body capable of movements absent from modern whales. And then there is the blue whale. At approximately 33 meters, it exceeds every confirmed animal discussed throughout this story. Longer than the great ichthyosaurs, longer than the giant sharks, longer than the immense reptiles that once ruled vanished seas. It exists not in deep time, but in the present ocean. These dimensions are not abstractions. They are the actual measurements of actual animals that occupied the same planet we inhabit now. The ocean contained them because, throughout its history, the ocean has always been capable of containing the unimaginable. Warm water stretched across the center of a continent that no longer exists in its ancient form, where wheat fields, highways, and grasslands now occupy the heart of North America. A broad inland sea once connected distant horizons. The Western Interior Seaway, during the late Cretaceous, divided the continent into separate land masses and created one of the most densely populated marine ecosystems ever confirmed by the fossil record. Between approximately 75 and 66 million years ago, it became a place where large predators existed at nearly every level of the food web, layered one above another in remarkable abundance. The richness of the environment began with its geography. Shallow seas allowed sunlight to penetrate vast areas of water, fueling enormous productivity. Nutrients circulated continuously through the basin, supporting dense populations of fish, cephalopods, reptiles, birds, and sharks. Rather than concentrating power into a single dominant hunter, the ecosystem distributed it across multiple lineages, evolving simultaneously. Each occupied a slightly different role, yet all shared the same waters. Among the most formidable was Tylosaurus proriger, reaching approximately 12 to 14 meters in length. Fossil evidence reveals an animal with extraordinary dietary breadth. Remains recovered from stomach contents include diving birds, sharks, fish, smaller marine reptiles, and even other predators. It occupied a position where almost anything encountered could become prey. Yet it was far from alone. Mosasaurus hoffmanii, approaching 17 meters in maximum confirmed length, cruised through the same marine world. Built for pursuit in open water, it represented a different evolutionary solution to apex predation. Alongside these giants moved Platecarpus tympaniticus, smaller and more agile, exploiting opportunities that rewarded speed and maneuverability over sheer size. The ecosystem contained multiple successful mosasaur designs operating at once, each occupying overlapping but distinct ecological spaces. Large herbivores never dominated this ocean in the manner seen on land. Instead, immense prey animals often remained vulnerable throughout life. Archelon ischiros, the largest confirmed sea turtle in Earth's history, reached approximately 4.6 meters in length. Its presence added another layer to an already crowded system. Nearby swam Ichthyotitan audax, a bony fish growing to approximately 6 meters. One celebrated fossil preserves an individual that swallowed a prey fish approximately 1.8 meters long, only to perish before digestion could begin. The moment remained frozen for tens of millions of years, preserving direct evidence of the scale at which predation operated. Above and below these animals moved Hesperornithine diving birds, flightless specialists adapted to life in the sea. Their remains appear within Tylosaurus specimens, demonstrating that even skilled marine hunters could become prey. Long necks also threaded through the ecosystem. Elasmosaurus and related plesiosaurs, some reaching approximately 14 meters, navigated the water with bodies unlike anything alive today. Air-breathing reptiles shared the sea with sharks, birds, fish, and other reptiles in a web of interactions remarkable for both complexity and intensity. The shark community added further pressure. Cretoxyrhina mantelli, sometimes called the Ginsu shark, reached approximately 6 meters and displayed evidence of powerful predatory behavior. Fossils preserve bite marks matching its teeth on large marine reptiles, including mosasaurs. These traces reveal encounters in which even enormous predators were not entirely secure. Survival depended not on occupying a single untouchable position, but on navigating a landscape where dangerous competitors existed in every direction. What emerges from the fossil record is not a simple pyramid with one ruler at the summit. It is a network of overlapping apex predators operating across different depths, body sizes, hunting styles, and ecological niches. A Tylosaurus might consume a plesiosaur. A large mosasaur might attack a smaller mosasaur. A shark might wound a marine reptile. Predator and prey exchanged places depending on circumstance, size, age, and opportunity. The food chain possessed no meaningful ceiling because its highest levels interacted directly with one another. For millions of years, this arrangement persisted, refined by evolution and sustained by extraordinary productivity. Then, in geological terms, it vanished almost instantly. Every species inhabiting this intricate network disappeared. The asteroid impact at the end of the Cretaceous erased not only famous terrestrial animals, but also the most densely layered apex predator ecosystem the ocean had ever assembled. Long after the shock of extinction had passed into stone, the ocean settled into a new rhythm. Currents continued to circulate between continents. Plankton blooms still rose and faded with the seasons. Predators hunted, prey fled, and life resumed the endless work of adaptation. From a distance, the recovery might seem complete, yet the ocean that emerged after 66 million years ago was not a restored version of what had existed before. It was a different world built from surviving fragments, carrying forward some lineages while leaving others behind forever. Across the Cenozoic era, new giants appeared. Basilosaurus moved through ancient seas with a body unlike any whale alive today. Livyatan developed immense jaws armed with functional teeth in both upper and lower jaws. Megalodon reached dimensions that made it the defining predator of its age. Later still came the animals familiar to the modern ocean, creatures that continue to shape marine ecosystems in the present day. By any measure, these were extraordinary descendants of a planet that had endured catastrophe and begun again. Yet, something subtle had changed. The ecological architecture of the late Cretaceous never fully returned. That earlier ocean had supported an unusual layering of apex predators, reptiles, sharks, giant fish, diving birds, and long-necked marine hunters, sharing overlapping territories and interacting in complex ways. Different body plans competed within the same waters simultaneously. Power was distributed across multiple evolutionary experiments at once. The rebuilding ocean produced impressive predators, but the diversity of forms occupying the highest trophic levels became narrower. The Miocene approached that earlier richness more closely than any other period after the extinction. Megalodon and Livyatan hunted many of the same prey species and existed within the same broad ecosystems. Their coexistence created one of the most remarkable predator assemblages ever confirmed. Even so, both belong to lineages already familiar in the Cenozoic seas. The range of body designs had contracted compared with the sprawling variety once present in the ancient inland oceans of the Cretaceous. While many dominant groups vanished, one lineage persisted through every upheaval. Sharks remained. They endured environmental crises that erased entire communities. They survived changes in ocean chemistry, fluctuations in climate, and the 5 major mass extinction events that transformed life on Earth. Across roughly 400 million years, their presence never disappeared from the marine record. Their success was not built upon occupying a single niche. It emerged from flexibility. Different shark species could exploit different prey, inhabit different depths, mature under different conditions, and recover populations through reproductive strategies that favored resilience. This continuity remains visible today. The great white shark, reaching lengths of approximately 6 meters, is not a diminished megalodon and not its direct descendant. Yet, it belongs to a broader evolutionary heritage that survived beside Megalodon, persisted beyond the disappearance of Livyatan, and continued through the restructuring of entire ecosystems. Within its body exists a lineage whose roots extend far deeper into time than many of the giants that once dominated the sea. Modern apex predators are formidable in their own right. Orcas display cooperation and social intelligence on a remarkable scale. Sperm whales descend into immense depths and navigate darkness through sound. Great white sharks combine speed, sensory precision, and efficient predatory design. Each occupies a powerful position within contemporary marine ecosystems. Yet none performs the ecological role once held by Megalodon. No solitary predator consistently hunts healthy adult blue whales. The hyper-apex niche that existed during the height of Megalodon's reign has remained vacant for approximately 3.6 million years. The ocean that surrounds the continents today is therefore both ancient and incomplete. It carries survivors from deep evolutionary time while preserving absences that have never been filled. Some lineages endured because they could change. Others vanished because they could not change quickly enough. The balance that emerged from those losses persisted for millions of years. Now that balance is shifting again, at a pace unmatched in the ocean's history since the day the asteroid struck and altered the course of life forever. A child standing beside a shoreline inherits an ocean already shaped by countless events that occurred before their birth. The fish they see, the whales they hear about, the number of seabirds crossing the horizon, all of it feels ordinary because it is familiar. Human memory rarely extends beyond a lifetime, and even cultural memory reaches back only a few generations. The ocean, however, measures time differently. It carries records not in stories but in bones, sediments, fossils, and populations. When those records are examined together, they reveal a remarkable truth. What people call normal is often only the latest version of a system that has already changed. Ecologists describe this phenomenon as shifting baseline syndrome. Each generation accepts the conditions it encounters during youth as the natural state of the world. As abundance declines gradually over decades or centuries, the loss becomes difficult to perceive because every new generation begins from a different starting point. The baseline moves quietly. Expectations move with it. Tracing the ocean backward reveals how dramatically those expectations can differ from historical reality. 10,000 years ago, shortly before the rise of large civilizations, the seas contained immense concentrations of large animals. Great whale populations moved through every major ocean basin. Vast schools of fish gathered in numbers difficult to imagine today. Sharks occupied coastal and offshore habitats across the globe. Estimates of large animal biomass suggest levels many times greater than those found in modern oceans. Predators and prey existed in densities shaped by natural ecological processes rather than industrial extraction. A shorter journey into the past reveals similar patterns. 500 years ago, early European explorers crossing the North Atlantic described fish populations of extraordinary abundance. Cod schools appeared so dense that observers claimed they could be gathered with astonishing ease. In warmer waters, sea turtles moved through the Caribbean in such numbers that mariners recorded hearing their activity around wooden hulls during the night. These accounts were not descriptions of pristine fantasy worlds. They were observations made by people encountering ecosystems that still retained much of their long-accumulated biological richness. 2 centuries ago, the situation remained remarkable by contemporary standards. Blue whale populations are estimated to have approached roughly 250,000 individuals before the industrial whaling era. Humpback whales occupied oceans in numbers far beyond those familiar today. Large predators remained widespread, and many marine food webs still operated with a scale that reflected millions of years of ecological development. The contrast with the present emerges gradually but unmistakably. Modern commercial fishing removes approximately 80 million tons of marine life from the ocean each year. Studies indicate that large shark populations have declined by roughly 70% since the 1970s. Seabird populations dependent upon marine prey have experienced similar declines since the middle of the 20th century. These figures describe changes occurring within a span of time shorter than a single human lifetime. What exists today is therefore not an untouched baseline of ocean ecology. It is the result of centuries of harvesting, habitat alteration, technological expansion, and environmental change, arriving more rapidly than many species can fully adapt. The ocean remains vast, productive, and filled with extraordinary life, yet it does not represent the same biological state encountered by earlier generations. The process continues. Every decade establishes a new reference point. A population considered healthy in the present might have appeared severely depleted to an observer living a century ago. Expectations adjust quietly. Memory shortens. The baseline shifts again. Viewed against the backdrop of hundreds of millions of years, this observation is neither accusation nor lament. It is context. The long history of marine predators, survivors, extinctions, recoveries, and transformations makes it impossible to separate the present ocean from the worlds that came before it. The ocean visible now is not a finished destination. It is a moment within an ongoing story, still responding to natural changes set in motion millions of years ago, while simultaneously adapting to forces that operate on timescales unprecedented in its history. Far from coastlines, beyond shipping lanes, and beyond the reach of sunlight, an immense archive settles grain by grain onto the floor of the Pacific Ocean. No shelves hold its contents. No librarian arranges its pages, yet it preserves one of the most complete histories ever assembled. Tiny particles drift downward through the water column, accumulating layer upon layer across millions of years. New material settles atop old material, compressing the past into a vertical record that extends deep beneath the seabed. Long after bones dissolve and ecosystems vanish, these layers remain. When scientists lower coring equipment into the ocean floor and recover cylinders of sediment, they are not merely collecting mud, they are retrieving chronological sequences of environmental information. Each layer carries chemical traces inherited from the ocean that existed when that sediment was deposited. Read carefully. The cores reveal changes in climate, productivity, extinction, recovery, and biological abundance stretching across immense spans of time. Among the most important signals are oxygen isotopes preserved within microscopic shells. These isotopes allow researchers to reconstruct ancient ocean temperatures with remarkable precision. Slight variations in their ratios reflect shifts in global climate, recording periods when the seas grew warmer or colder than today. Carbon isotopes provide a different perspective, revealing changes in biological productivity and the movement of carbon through marine ecosystems. Together, they create a picture not of isolated moments, but of entire worlds rising and fading across geological time. The smallest organisms often preserve the largest stories. Foraminifera, microscopic creatures that build delicate shells, leave behind enormous quantities of fossil material. Their remains accumulate continuously on the ocean floor. Variations in species composition, shell chemistry, and abundance provide detailed evidence of changing ocean conditions. Through these tiny archives, entire chapters of Earth's environmental history become visible. Certain horizons within the sediment stand apart from all others. One of the most famous appears as a thin layer enriched in iridium, an element rare within Earth's crust but common in extraterrestrial material. This horizon marks the impact associated with the extinction event that ended the age of non-avian dinosaurs and transformed marine ecosystems across the globe. The remarkable aspect is not merely its existence, but its consistency. The same signature appears worldwide at the same geological boundary, linking distant oceans through a single moment in planetary history. Viewed through these records, the ocean reveals itself as dynamic rather than stable. Temperatures have risen and fallen repeatedly. Productivity has flourished during nutrient-rich intervals and contracted during ecological crises. Entire communities have disappeared, only to be replaced by new assemblages shaped by changing conditions. After every extinction event, the sediment records silence, followed by gradual rebuilding. Life returns, adapts, diversifies, and establishes new equilibria. The archive also illuminates the present. Comparisons with ancient climate transitions indicate that current rates of ocean warming exceed those documented during most intervals of the confirmed record since the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum approximately 56 million years ago. That ancient warming event reorganized marine ecosystems on a global scale. Species distributions shifted, ecological relationships changed, and the structure of the ocean transformed. Yet even that episode unfolded more gradually than many modern trends. Across its long history, the ocean has endured asteroid impacts, volcanic upheavals, glacial expansions, and intervals of extreme warmth. It persisted through all of them. What distinguishes the present is not the existence of change itself, but the speed at which change is occurring. Ecological systems that once adapted across thousands or millions of years now confront transformations measured in decades. Still, the archive continues to grow. Every day, new particles settle through the water and come to rest upon the seafloor. They carry traces of modern temperatures, modern chemistry, modern ecosystems, and modern disturbances. Future scientists, separated from the present by spans of time difficult to imagine, will someday recover these layers and read them as carefully as today's researchers read the records of vanished oceans. The sediment will remember. It always has. The next chapter is already being written, one grain at a time, onto the floor of the sea. Imagine a census taken across the full span of this story. Not a list of species alive today, but a record of every great marine predator that once dominated an ocean and seemed permanent while it lived. The names accumulate through the ages like distant constellations: Tylosaurus, Mosasaurus, Pliosaurus, Funke, Shonisaurus, Ichthyotitan, Basilosaurus, Livyatan, Megalodon. Each ruled a particular world. Each occupied an ecological role refined across millions of years. Each appeared, flourished, and disappeared. What becomes striking after enough time is not the extinction itself, it is the consistency of the pattern. No apex predator remained indefinitely. No lineage secured a permanent claim upon the sea. Dominance lasted for a while, sometimes for tens of millions of years. Then conditions changed, oceans warmed or cooled, prey populations shifted, competitors emerged, continents moved. Extinction arrived through different mechanisms, but the result remained the same. The vacancy left behind became an opportunity. The ocean responded to every disappearance in a manner that appears almost unimaginably patient. Ecological space opened. Evolution experimented. New forms emerged from survivors. Sometimes they resembled what came before. More often they did not. Marine reptiles gave way to other marine reptiles. Later, mammals entered the water and developed into predators unlike anything that had preceded them. Sharks persisted across nearly every transition, yet even they changed repeatedly through time. The process was not directed toward a final outcome. It simply continued. Seen across approximately 500 million years of apex predator history, extinction begins to look different from the way it is often imagined. It is not merely the ending of a lineage. It is also the creation of possibility. Every animal described throughout this journey existed because earlier occupants of the ocean disappeared and left ecological opportunities behind. The giant hunters of one era inherited worlds shaped by losses from another. In turn, they vanished and contributed to the conditions from which future ecosystems emerged. Megalodon offers a particularly revealing example. Its disappearance approximately 3.6 million years ago removed a predator occupying a niche so specialized that no direct replacement followed. The vacancy remained. Baleen whales expanded into new evolutionary possibilities. Body sizes increased. Eventually, the largest animal in Earth's history emerged. The absence of one giant helped shape the existence of another. Extinction did not halt the story, it altered its direction. The philosophical challenge appears only when the observer becomes part of the narrative. For hundreds of millions of years, the ocean transformed itself without witnesses capable of understanding the pattern. Sediments accumulated, species appeared and vanished, ecosystems assembled and dissolved. The processes unfolded regardless of observation. Then, quite recently, a species emerged that could reconstruct the sequence. Fossils could be collected, isotopes could be measured, ancient climates could be inferred from stone. For the first time, a participant inside the system gained the ability to perceive something close to the whole arc. The ocean itself does not depend upon that awareness. Long before human beings existed, it endured asteroid impacts, volcanic upheavals, warming intervals, cooling intervals, and repeated ecological reorganizations. It continued through all of them. It will continue through changes yet to come. The currents do not require understanding. The tides do not consult memory. Life adapts, disappears, and returns according to processes far older than civilization. Yet awareness introduces a possibility absent from earlier chapters. Knowledge does not guarantee wisdom, nor does understanding automatically alter outcomes. What it offers is a choice. The mechanisms recorded in fossils, sediments, and extinction events are no longer invisible. They can be recognized while they are unfolding. Whether that recognition changes anything lies beyond the reach of paleontology and beyond the authority of the fossil record. The ocean's story remains unfinished. It stretches backward into depths of time, almost impossible to comprehend, and forward into distances equally difficult to imagine. It possesses no visible ending, only successive chapters shaped by changing conditions and new forms of life. We occupy one of those chapters now. What distinguishes it is not merely the challenges it contains, but the unprecedented fact that something within it has become aware of the larger story and is capable of reflecting upon its place inside that vast and continuing sea of time. At night, from almost any coastline on Earth, the horizon appears unchanged. A dark boundary separates sea from sky, and the water beyond it seems timeless, as though it has always existed in its present form. Yet every wave crossing that horizon carries a history far older than any landscape visible from shore. The water moving beneath moonlight tonight belongs to a system that has persisted for approximately 3.8 billion years, older than forests, older than animals, older even than the continents in their modern arrangement. That water once flowed above creatures whose names survive only because stone remembered them. It rolled across Cretaceous seas where Mosasaurus surfaced to breathe between hunts, rising from depths inhabited by predators and prey woven into food webs of extraordinary complexity. It carried the immense bodies of Shonisaurus through Triassic oceans that existed long before mammals became significant actors in the story of life. It surrounded Basilosaurus during an Eocene world so warm that tropical conditions reached toward the poles, creating coastlines and currents almost impossible to reconcile with the planet familiar today. Much later, it transmitted the focused pulses of Livyatan, sound moving through seawater as the great whale interpreted returning echoes, and assembled an acoustic picture of a world hidden beyond sight. Those animals feel distant because they are gone, yet in another sense they never entirely left. Their bodies entered the long cycle that governs all oceans. Bone became mineral, tissue became chemistry. Skeletons settled through the water column and disappeared beneath accumulating layers of sediment. Across immense spans of time, fragments of entire ecosystems were compressed into the geological archive resting on the seafloor. The ocean retained traces of every age, storing them not as memory in any conscious sense, but as physical evidence written into stone. What inhabits the water now belongs to a different chapter. The immense predator hierarchies that once dominated entire eras have changed. Ecological roles have shifted. The hyper-apex niche, once occupied by Megalodon, remains unfilled. In its place swims the largest animal ever confirmed by science, a giant that feeds not through violence, but through abundance. Somewhere tonight, far across the Southern Ocean, a blue whale may be filtering vast clouds of krill through curtains of baleen, transforming countless small organisms into a body larger than any known creature of the past. Its calls move through entire ocean basins, frequencies so low that human hearing cannot fully perceive them, yet perfectly suited to the medium that has carried sound for billions of years. The fossil record reveals one lesson with unusual consistency. The ocean never remains what it was. Every age appears permanent while it lasts. Every ecosystem seems complete from within its own moment. Yet, over longer intervals, permanence dissolves, currents reorganize, climates shift, species emerge and disappear. The ocean continuously becomes something different from itself. That future form remains unwritten. Sediment can preserve the past, but it does not predict what comes next. Scientific understanding can identify mechanisms and patterns, yet it cannot fully determine the shape of the centuries ahead. The next version of the ocean is being influenced in real time through changing temperatures, shifting distributions of life, and decisions occurring across coastlines and continents around the world. The ocean itself does not require awareness to continue. For almost all of its history, it persisted without any species capable of understanding even a fraction of its story. It survived impacts, extinctions, warming intervals, cooling intervals, and transformations beyond counting. Yet there is now something genuinely new within that ancient system. A species exists that can trace the record backward, recognize the patterns, and understand its own position within them. Whether that awareness changes anything remains uncertain. The capacity itself, however, is unprecedented. Across the entire history of life on Earth, that possibility has never existed before now. A fragment of bone resting in a museum drawer appears unremarkable at first glance. Pale stone, weathered edges, a label attached by careful hands, yet entire oceans can be hidden inside such objects. The remarkable thing is not merely that these remains survived. It is that they can still speak across spans of time so vast that human history becomes almost invisible beside them. Every animal described throughout this journey was physically present in the world. They were not symbols created afterward to illustrate ideas. They occupied real water under real skies. Muscles contracted, hearts circulated blood, eyes gathered light, bodies moved through currents that no longer exist. The distance between the present and those vanished oceans can create the illusion that they belong to a different category of reality, something halfway between fact and imagination. The fossils say otherwise. Tylosaurus proriger attacked and consumed another marine reptile in a late Cretaceous sea. The evidence remains preserved. Fossils recovered from Kansas contain the traces of that encounter, including the physical marks left behind by teeth and the remains carried within the predator's body. Approximately 80 million years separated that event from the scientists who examined and documented it in the early years of the 21st century. Yet the chain connecting the two moments remained intact. An interaction in an ancient ocean became an observable fact in a modern laboratory. The same continuity appears in the story of Ichthyotitan severnensis. Along a coastline in Somerset, weather and tides gradually exposed pieces of a jaw that had rested inside rock for roughly 200 million years. In two separate discoveries, ordinary walks along the shore intersected with extraordinary history. A fossil enthusiast found one fragment. Later, a father and daughter found another. Recognition followed observation. Observation led to communication. Communication led to scientific study. In the year 2024, an animal that had vanished before the age of dinosaurs fully unfolded on land, received a formal name. Its jawbone, more than 2 meters long, became part of the human record. There is something quietly profound about this sequence. The ocean produced these animals. Geological processes preserved fragments of them. Sediment protected those fragments through unimaginable spans of time. Human curiosity eventually uncovered them. None of these stages required intention. Each followed naturally from the physical rules governing the planet. Yet together they created a bridge, connecting living observers with creatures separated from them by hundreds of millions of years. Seen this way, paleontology becomes less a study of disappearance and more a study of continuity. The animals are gone, yet evidence of their existence remains accessible. Their dimensions can be measured. Their diets can be inferred. Their movements can be reconstructed. Their place within ancient ecosystems can be understood with increasing clarity. Stone retains enough information for entire worlds to emerge again. What lingers after all the measurements and classifications is not primarily fear, nor even astonishment. It is a sense of scale that becomes difficult to set aside. The scale of time required to produce such creatures, the scale of evolutionary experimentation unfolding across successive oceans, the scale of a planet capable of generating forms as different as Mosasaurus, Ichthyotitan, Livyatan, Megalodon, and the blue whale, each perfectly real within its own era. And beyond every fossil cabinet, beyond every published paper, beyond every named specimen, the ocean continues its work. Most of its volume remains unexplored. Most habitats remain only partially sampled. Vast regions have never been observed directly. While the fossils reveal what once existed, the living ocean still contains chapters that have not yet entered the record, waiting in darkness beneath the same water that has carried life for billions of years. A map of the ocean floor appears complete when viewed from a distance. Colored contours suggest precision. Trenches, ridges, plains, and seamounts seem neatly cataloged. Yet much of that apparent certainty dissolves when examined closely. Large portions of the seabed remain known only through broad measurements, inferred shapes, and incomplete surveys. The impression of familiarity often exceeds the reality. Even now, in an age of satellites, autonomous vehicles, and global communication, the ocean retains immense regions that have never been observed directly by human eyes. Beneath a depth of roughly 200 meters, sunlight fades and the character of the sea changes. The world below enters a realm where darkness becomes the default condition, where pressure rises steadily and where vast communities of organisms continue lives largely hidden from observation. Scientists estimate that the deep ocean may contain approximately 10 million species. Of those, only around 250,000 have been formally described. The difference between those numbers is not a relic of history. It represents the current state of marine science. This perspective changes the meaning of discovery. In many scientific fields, researchers work within systems that are substantially mapped and cataloged. Marine biology often operates differently. Entire branches of life remain undocumented. New species continue to emerge from expeditions into regions visited only rarely. In some cases, organisms are recognized from fragments, genetic traces, or fleeting encounters long before their broader ecological role becomes clear. The giant squid offers a striking example. Physical evidence of its existence accumulated for centuries through stranded remains and the contents of sperm whale stomachs. Its presence was never mythical. It was supported by specimens, measurements, and repeated observations. Yet despite this certainty, no one photographed a living giant squid in its natural environment until the year 2004. The first video footage followed in 2006. Even today, aspects of its behavior remain only partially understood. An animal capable of reaching extraordinary lengths existed within scientific knowledge for generations before it could be watched moving through its own world. The colossal squid presents an even more recent story, described scientifically in the year 1925. It remained elusive despite its enormous size. A complete adult specimen was not examined until 2007. Its eyes, among the largest possessed by any living animal, evolved within darkness that humans rarely enter. Its behavior in the wild remains largely unknown. It exists not as a mystery in the absence of evidence, but as a reminder that evidence alone does not immediately reveal an organism's full place within nature. The deeper one travels into the mesopelagic, bathypelagic, and hadal realms, the more incomplete the picture becomes. Many animals confirmed from these environments have been discovered only within recent decades. New technologies continue to reveal forms of life previously unseen. Some species are known from a single specimen. Others are represented by scattered encounters separated by years. Entire ecological relationships remain unresolved. What emerges from this reality is a subtle shift in perspective. The ocean is not a thoroughly understood system containing a handful of unanswered questions. It is a largely unexplored system, illuminated by scattered islands of knowledge. The fossil record revealed worlds that once existed. The living ocean reveals how much remains unseen even now. For approximately 3.8 billion years, the ocean has been generating life, shaping ecosystems, and recording its own history. Humans have explored it systematically for only a tiny fraction of that span, roughly 65 years, on the scale of modern deep ocean investigation. When the immense history already uncovered is placed beside the immense present, still hidden, the word ocean begins to expand beyond its familiar meaning. It becomes not merely a place on Earth, but an ongoing frontier whose past is extraordinary and whose present remains largely unwritten. Far below the reach of storms, beneath shipping routes, coastlines, and the shifting concerns of surface life, thin particles continue their slow descent through the water column. Tiny shells, mineral grains, fragments of organisms, volcanic dust, and chemical residues settle onto the seafloor grain by grain. Over immense spans of time, they accumulate into layers, and those layers become a record unlike any archive humanity has ever built. Nothing writes these pages deliberately. They form through physics, chemistry, and time, preserving traces of worlds long vanished. Within the sediment resting on the Pacific floor lies evidence of every age explored throughout this journey. There are signatures of warm oceans and cold oceans, intervals of extraordinary abundance, and intervals when life struggled to recover from catastrophe. There are chemical markers left by extinction events, shifts in ocean circulation, changes in atmospheric composition, and the countless biological communities that rose and fell across hundreds of millions of years. Compressed into stone, these layers transform time into something that can be sampled, measured, and read. What emerges from that reading is not a story of stability. The ocean has never remained fixed in a single state. It has existed under conditions dramatically different from those of the present. At times, it was warmer by margins that reshaped entire ecosystems. At other times, cooling altered circulation patterns and redirected the movement of life across the globe. Acidity changed. Productivity expanded and contracted. Predator communities assembled, flourished, disappeared, and were replaced by forms that would have seemed unimaginable to the creatures preceding them. The sediment record also reveals repeated interruption. 5 major mass extinctions altered the course of marine history. Each removed vast numbers of species and dismantled ecological structures that had taken millions of years to assemble. Yet after every collapse came reconstruction. Survivors diversified, vacant niches filled, new experiments emerged. The ocean repeatedly demonstrated an extraordinary capacity to begin again, not by restoring what had been lost, but by creating something different. Seen from this perspective, the great animals described across these sections become part of a single continuous narrative rather than isolated curiosities. Ichthyotitan severnensis moved through Triassic waters approximately 202 million years ago. Basilosaurus inhabited Eocene seas tens of millions of years later. Megalodon appeared, flourished, and vanished. The blue whale swims in the present age. Their lives were separated by immense intervals, yet each belonged to the same ongoing process. The ocean continually explores what life can become when evolution is given vast spaces, immense durations, and the persistent pressures of competition, survival, and adaptation. Perhaps the most striking lesson carried by the sediment is that there is no identifiable moment that can be called completion. No layer announces that evolution has reached its destination. No horizon marks the final configuration of life. Every period that appears permanent eventually becomes another chapter beneath accumulating sediment. Every dominant species ultimately joins the archive. Every ecosystem becomes part of the background from which something else emerges. Human history occupies only the thinnest fraction of this record. Entire civilizations pass in less time than it takes for many geological processes to become visible. Yet, despite that brevity, we possess the unusual ability to read portions of the archive and recognize the continuity connecting distant eras. The layers reveal that the ocean has always existed in transition, moving from one arrangement of life toward another. The next arrangement remains unwritten. No sediment layer contains it because it has not yet formed. No fossil can describe it because it does not yet belong to the past. The record ends at the present moment, where deposition continues grain by grain beneath dark water. Beyond that boundary lies only possibility. And so the ocean continues, as it always has, carrying its history forward without pause, reshaping itself across spans of time so vast that observation becomes optional, persistence itself becoming the defining constant of the sea. Below the reach of sunlight, Beyond the last fading traces of the surface world, the ocean becomes something simpler. Color falls away, distance loses meaning. The water settles into darkness, so complete that it seems detached from time itself. Yet this darkness is not empty. It is one of the oldest environments on Earth, a place where the fundamental conditions of existence have persisted across spans of history almost beyond comprehension. Long before forests spread across continents, long before mammals emerged, long before any creature possessed eyes capable of looking upward toward a star-filled sky, this darkness already existed. It occupied the deep basins of ancient oceans and waited beneath worlds that would rise and disappear. Continents shifted above it. Mountains formed and eroded away. Entire ecosystems emerged, flourished, and vanished. Through all of it, the deep water remained, shaped by the same pressure, the same cold, and the same physical laws that govern it tonight. The darkness that surrounded Ichthyotitan was not fundamentally different from the darkness that exists now. More than 200 million years have passed since that immense animal moved through Triassic seas, yet the deep water it inhabited obeyed the same principles. Sound traveled through it. Pressure increased with depth. Light disappeared beyond a certain point and never returned. The details of life changed. The environment itself endured. The same was true during the age of Mosasaurus. Vast marine reptiles crossed oceans that no longer exist on any modern map, surfacing beneath skies lost to geological time. Beneath them lay the same abyssal world, the same descending darkness, the same silent depths stretching downward beyond sight. When Livyatan hunted through the Miocene Pacific, sending pulses of sound into the water and receiving echoes from distant prey, those echoes traveled through conditions recognizable even now. Tonight, somewhere far from shore, the deep ocean continues exactly as it has for ages beyond counting. The inhabitants have changed completely. The great reptiles are gone. The giant sharks are gone. The whale hunters of vanished epochs are gone. Yet life remains present in astonishing abundance. The largest confirmed animal in Earth's history moves through modern seas, feeding on organisms so small they drift almost unnoticed. Giant squid navigate depths where sunlight never arrives. Countless species complete their entire existence beyond the limits of human observation. Most have no names. Many have never been collected. Some may never be encountered at all. They move through a realm that remains only partially visible despite every technological achievement of the modern world. The deep ocean continues to contain more unknowns than certainties. Meanwhile, the animals that filled earlier chapters have entered a different form of existence. Their bodies became fossils, their bones settled into sediment, their traces merged with the geological record accumulating across millions of years. Teeth, vertebrae, jaw fragments, chemical signatures, and impressions preserved within stone became the evidence through which their lives could be reconstructed. The ocean retained those fragments without intention, storing them layer upon layer beneath its floor. Even now, that process continues. Tiny particles descend through the water column. Sediment accumulates. Chemical traces settle into place. The present moment is entering the archive exactly as every previous age entered it. The record is still being written. Millions of years from now, whatever follows this era will encounter evidence of it. The layers forming tonight will remain. They will speak silently of temperatures, ecosystems, extinctions, recoveries, and lives once lived. They will become another chapter in a story that stretches backward for billions of years. The ocean does not arrive at conclusions. It does not pause. It does not finish. Across approximately 3.8 billion years, through every transformation the planet has experienced, it has continued. And tonight, beneath the surface, beyond the light, within the same enduring darkness that held every creature remembered in this story, it continues still.